Welcome to the first episode of the PR Coach. Now, this platform, this series is really called for by the feedback I've been getting a lot from people. I'm known for somebody who's been in the communication industry for just under 25 years now. If you combine it with my entire media industry, it's about 30 years that I've been in the media communication space. Now, the media is a very tricky space, and I thought I'm going to use this platform to help us understand how the media works, to understand how communication works, to understand how the two come together, to help you with tips, to get us to have a conversation, to get you to ask me questions when you have doubts about something. Why did something happen this way or that way? So this platform, which is going to be on LinkedIn and YouTube, is your platform really. It's a platform where I want to share my knowledge about this industry. I have been consulting in this industry for the last 23 years, and before then I worked as a journalist, among others, for the Sunday Times, the SABC, the Cape Times, and I've written also for foreign publications. So I thought, for tonight I don't want to focus on a specific subject, and I'll be picking on subjects as we go forward from episode to episode, and some of the subjects will be raised by you in your questions or your comments. But I thought I should focus a little bit on this concept of news, because people say, but why is the media only focusing on this? Why are they writing the same story? Does it seem like they have an agenda? Now I'm going to help you understand how decisions are taken. A news decision is a very simple decision. There are a few things that influence what makes news. But firstly, let's start with, what is news really? Now I'm going to give you the most interesting definition of news I learned as a reporter, as a student reporter. The definition of news that I'll never forget said, news is all that hurts, all else is advertising. Now, of course, when you're thinking hurt, you're going to think, that's why they like blood and they like horrible stuff. No. In this case, hurt means excite. If it doesn't excite, it is not news. It must excite the audience. And there are many things that excite the audience. Yes, crime excites us for whatever reason. Sex too. Money. These things really excite us. And that's how a news-making decision happens. When those editors sit there, they ask themselves, whose eyebrows this is going to raise? If they wanted to do a story on, let's say, Madonna adopting a child in South Africa, is it going to excite? Of course it's going to excite. They want to do that story. But if you are adopting a child, and you could be adopting 10 at a go, well, is it going to excite? It probably will excite people in your family, but not necessarily the consumers of the medium that has been told about the story. I always make this joke about a friend of mine who called me when I worked on The Star, I think it was in 1997, and he said to me, hey Prayak, Mr. So-and-so has passed on. Now, Mr. So-and-so was a prominent teacher in Dobsonville back in the day. But he was prominent in Dobsonville among people that he had taught, and maybe a few people around those. Now, I worked for The Star, a premium Gauteng newspaper. How would I justify pitching a story of Mr. So-and-so in Dobsonville, who I actually will tell you people in Meadowlands that borders Dobsonville or Zondi would not have known of? Why would then Mr. So-and-so be on the pages of The Star? So those decisions are taken that way. So let me share with you then a few things that determine or that influence how news is determined, or how news is chosen. One, prominence. Prominence is such a big thing. You could be president of this country and say the most banal thing. You will make news because you are the president of the country. Mike Tyson once made a joke, and I'm going to be careful about how I share that joke. after he had been stripped of his title, after he took a bit of Ivan Holyfield's ear, and Holyfield was going to fight Lennox Lewis, he said, well, you know, Ivan and Lennox can go fight at the Madison Square Garden, and I can stand outside and pull out my pants. People will come watch Mike Tyson. That's prominence. What he was saying to you is that the media will rush to cover the president even when there is something that you think is more interesting, because nobody wants to miss what the president is saying. And the president can be boring, or we can even be hating of the president. But prominence is so important. Money, rands and cents. So if you say, you know, at the Zondo Commission, so-and-so, whom we don't really know, let's say Mr. Nzeku. Yeah, we don't know Mr. Nzeku. He's not a newsmaker. But the minute there's a story at the Zondo Commission that a Mr. Nzeku is involved in a 200 million rand fraud or scam, that's news. Therefore, 200 million makes the story more relevant than Nzeku. Had it been Nzeku on his own, editors would have said, but yeah, so what? Who is Nzeku? So, do you get it? So, I mean, one of those factors is consequence. COVID came with a lot of consequences and impact. So consequence and impact are so important in decision making or news decision making. When editors sit there and decide, they ask themselves, who is this going to impact? What is the consequence of this thing on our consumers? The bigger the consequence, the more relevant the story. Crime. It's a big newsmaker. I tell you now that, you know, if your company is reporting beautiful results on the same day that 16 people are killed in a criminal activity, or sadly, what we know of our country, gender-based violence, that is likely to make more news than your company that is done very well. But there's also human interest. There are softer stories that touch the heart, where people go, oh, or no, as we say it in our space. When people go that way, sometimes editors think that story is going to make a lot of people go, oh, so let's do that story. But it is not always a no story that's going to victor over a gosh kind of story like, oh my word. So if the story does not excite, it is difficult for that story to crack it into the media. You got to understand these things, therefore, when you sit there and criticize and ask yourself, but why did they do this story? And it could be in a documentary, it could be in an investigative program like, say, Checkpoint. When they choose those because they know it will catch your attention much more than a story of, well, Rams recorded a video yesterday. So what? By the way, speaking of which, so what is the biggest question asked in any newsroom? When you pitch a story at them, the first question they ask is, so what? What does it matter? Who is going to be excited about this story? Is it going to move the rand-dollar exchange? Is it going to change the price of petrol? Is it going to make women scream in excitement or make men scream in anger? So what? So it also means you must think about what you think is important. So what? If it's important only to you, it is not news, I'm afraid. But then there are other factors that are not so direct that impact news. One of those is what we call a gap in the news. Sometimes gaps happen. Sometimes things fall through. A story would have been done and then it's not complete. Something is missing in that story. And therefore a softer story occupies that space because they are now on deadline. So some stories make it because of the deadline that was missed by a bigger story, not because the other story was good. Once you have more discerning, you'll realize that. You'll start even yourself noticing, I'm not sure why this story made front page. But then there's human element. Editors and journalists are human beings too. Sometimes they will make important a story that matters to them or to the editor, because somebody who died was editor's friend, or somebody who did something exciting, used to work in that newspaper or in that newsroom, television newsroom or whatever else. So that person was just a great friend of theirs. I look at obituaries that I read in the newspapers and I ask myself, who's this fellow? Well, they could have been just of interest to somebody in the newsroom. But 9 out of 10 times, that doesn't matter much. What matters most is how many people will recognize this person we're writing about, how many people will be shocked or excited, how many people will comment. You want to see the proof of this? If you have seen a big news story, especially in a newspaper, check the same paper. If it's a daily, check the same paper in the next few days and read the letters to the editor. There's likely to be a letter that refers to that story. It shows you that many people were interested in that story. It is a science. The editors don't guess these things. They've done it for so many years. There is a formula that is being used to help you understand how news works. So really, you could argue that there's bias. And of course there is bias. And one day I'll have a conversation soon about things like objectivity, which I don't believe in. But I'll tell you the things that impact objectivity. We can talk about fairness. We can talk about all sorts of things that impact news. I'm not saying that the news people are clean. All I'm trying to do in this platform is to make you understand better how they get to those decisions. And of course, in this platform, I'll also criticize them, because I think that they also take decisions that are weak, that are unjustified, that are questionable, and therefore, this is where we're going to be. I want you to raise it. Should you pick up a story that you think doesn't smell good? Well, you know what? Drop me an email. pr@kingmaker.co.za is the email that you must use at all times. Whether you have a question, a comment, But most importantly, I want you to subscribe to this platform. I want you to get the notifications when it goes up, because it will go up all the time, once a week, and I will find issues. Sometimes I'll pick on a story, expand more on that story. Sometimes I will give you what would almost be a philosophical, but hopefully not academic, explanation on why things happen, or why they don't happen, or why they should happen. But you must understand that news is a business. The business of news is the same as any other business. Two other things, lastly, that impact news on the basis of business. One is competition. Do not expect the news media to treat the same stories the same. They are competing. In the same story, one could focus on the economic impact and the other could focus on the social impact, because they compete. They don't want to be doing the same thing, which is why, by the way, and one day I'll talk to you about media statements, why they fail. When you send a media statement to all media at the same time, you've just killed your story, because you've killed the competition. They want exclusivity. They want to know that they have the story alone. Not everybody else has the story. So this to all media thing at the top, or to all editors, watch out. But we'll talk about it some other day. The other one is location. And I made that example about Mr. So-and-so who died in Dobsonville. A big story in Cape Town is not necessarily a big story in KZN, or in Kimberley, or in Soweto. So that's how they determine how these things work. So please, do me a favor, participate. Let's have a conversation. With the PR coach, I'm here for you. I want you to ask questions. I want you to make comments. I want you to throw stuff at me and say, how does this work? And then I'll follow up. So you write to pr@kingmaker.co.za. Kingmaker is in KINGMAKER. pr@kingmaker.co.za. Ask questions, make comments. Let's have a conversation, but also comment on the platform. It goes on the platform. I want you to comment there, because sometimes you can have, immediate bent and get other people to be involved. But I hope, most importantly, you subscribe, because that's all you can give back to me. I'm going to give you all my knowledge, and I'm not going to make you pay for it. All I'm asking for you is at least press that subscribe button, and let's work together. I hope you love it. I hope you stay with us, and I hope it is fun for you, as it will be, certainly, for me. Cheers.